Julian, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. For those of you who don't know, Julian and I know each other from a past life, so I'm super excited to get to platform this awesome Portland kinkster on my show. Julian,
thank you so much for having me.
Tell us
I really appreciate this.
Yourself.
Well, a little bit about me. I am a Portland-based photographer and filthy barista. You can find me, frequently, well, up until the plague happening, in pretty much any coffee shop or any bar, quietly drinking whiskey to myself and usually thinking about the most inappropriate things possible, because that's just kind of how I roll. Yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I love it. I love it. You're in the right place.
Perfect.
All right. So we are talking a little bit about kink and identity and kind of where those two intersect and how that can benefit us. I guess at first we kind of need to lay some foundational stuff here. So what the fuck is a poly Viking power bottom? Please describe this for us.
All right, so let's break it down kind of section by section, bit by bit. A poly, that's kind of the first place to start. Only in the last few months have I kind of started to go into the poly direction. A few years ago, I had a really, really unhealthy brush with it that kind of turned me off for the longest time. And then, fast forward a few years until it was early mid-January or so, and I started to see someone, my now current partner, and she told me, hey, so just so you know, I am poly. I hope that's not a deal breaker. And I kind of realized, I need to get over my own baggage and my own shit, because that's kind of what's holding me back. I want to flourish, and I don't want my past, experiences, traumas, and all that define everything. So since then, I've done a whole lot of self-discovery, whole lot of research, whole lot of reading, and, moving into the poly direction. Just a couple days ago, finally met my partner's long-term partner, which was a interesting but very positive experience. Thankfully it went really well, but that's kind of the first section of it all. Poly, boom, there's that. And then the rest of it, Viking power bottom. So Viking is the next one that I kind of would like to address. I like to describe myself as a filthy heathen. I've been very interested with Norse mythology and the pantheon of the gods for many years now, in part due to ancestry, primarily Scandinavian is the biggest chunk. But in the last few months, I've been regularly practicing Norse paganism, or Alsatru, as it's also known. It's been a very wonderful, albeit new and weird experience. And one of the things about my spirituality is also kind of ties into the last couple things, power bottom a little bit. Part of what I practice is kind of consulting the runes and taking the runes. For those that aren't familiar, they are easiest way to describe it as kind of the individual quote unquote letters of the Elder Futhark quote unquote alphabet. Each one has its own specific magic, its own specific intention, its own specific power. Back in the day, circa 1200 years ago, Sather magic was a type of magic that was primarily practiced by women and femme people. And there was a lot of controversy regarding men practicing Sather magic because it was mostly associated with women. And the people who would practice it that were men, Sathmen, as far as I understand, they were frequently demeaned and diminished and referred to as ergi, I believe, and arger, which basically more or less translates to unmanly or assuming the passive homosexual role, i.e. they were bottom shamed.
Mm-hmm. Beta cuck, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to put it. And a lot of kind of what I like to do is say, fuck the system. I'm a sparkle. I'm doing my own thing. You can say what you will, but I'm being true to myself. And if you don't like it, take a long walk off of a short pier. I'm not listening. So part of the reason why I like to kind of describe myself as poly Viking power bottom is as a sparkly middle finger to ancestral spiritual homophobia that was primarily, back in the day, very deeply entrenched. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to kind of reclaim some of that through my own practices and through my own preferences. And this kind of ties into the last portion, the power bottom bit. I am a kinky and questionable person. I think most people who know me have seen the bruises and the marks all over me, and they just go, "Oh, dear Lord, man, get a room." Part of my preferences, while being a poly Viking power bottom, I'm also a hard switch. I really enjoy being on the impact side of it. I really enjoy being the submissive in that way and testing my own limits. So that's kind of where the power bottom kind of comes in. I mean, tie me to a tree and flog me until I'm senseless, and I'm going to have a glorious time. I'm just saying. So that's kind of the easiest way for me to kind of break down the the term for me.
Well, that's awesome. We got some history in there and some Scandinavian culture.
It's a pretty multifaceted, well-rounded sexuality, I have to say.
Right? Impressive.
I try my best to kind of like hit every single base and to make everyone along the way go, "I'm sorry, but the what now?" It's fun. It's so great making people just question everything. I love it.
That's our motto here. Question everything.
Perfect.
So, question for you then. Were you born a poly Viking power bottom, or is this something that you discovered along the way? And kind of can you tell us a little bit about the maybe not the individual components, because I know the poly thing is newer, and the power bottom thing maybe was an older part of this identity, but kind of as a whole, who you are now, the kinkster that is Julian. How did that progression kind of happen?
So I certainly was not born and started off in my life this way. A lot of it has been pretty recent developments. I mean, I mentioned that the whole poly thing is still very new to me. The whole like Norse mythology, that pantheon, that aspect of myself, it's been around for about the last like 10 years or so. I was raised more or less atheist. My mother is Jewish, therefore by default I am as well, but we never really practiced a whole lot. We kind of celebrated anything, everything, nothing at all. It was just kind of, let's do whatever feels right kind of thing. But about like 10, 12 years ago or so, is kind of when I started to kind of go into the Norse interest a lot more. Only within the last year or so, since I went through a breakup and kind of I became closer friends with active filthy heathens, as I like to call them. I think at least one of them's watching right now. Hi, Danae. Only once I started to kind of spend a little bit more time with my friend and her husband, did I start to kind of delve even deeper into that direction of the spirituality. And only in the last little while has it kind of developed a little bit more. I've always had interest and fascination with kink in general. However, that never was really an avenue I could pursue much up until very recently, just due to partner preferences at the times or incompatibility or what have you. That was never really much of an option for me up until very recently when I started seeing my partner and finding out that she's at least as kinky as I am, which has been a wonderful discovery. Only in the last few months have I kind of realized just exactly how deep that rabbit hole goes. I feel like there's a couple phrasing opportunities in there. Anyway.
We make all the puns here, especially about
rabbit holes.
We're about rabbit holes. We're good.
Well, that's just wonderful. I'm so excited for this. It's going to be sheer pandemonium. I'm not even sorry.
This is going to be painful. All right.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Julian, as you see this identity of yours kind of develop, and as we've kind of moved from a space of maybe discovering things, figuring things out to where you are now, a question that I come up with a lot for myself and just in the community in general is where do we go from here? Is this now a permanent part of your identity? Is this a stop in the road of kink? Are you going to change? Can you foresee changes happening? And maybe some things are kind of coming up now. They're like, oh, I want to try that, or oh, this avenue looks interesting.
Yeah. Well, I firmly believe that the only constant is change. So I'm sure that in a way, this is a temporary stop in the road while also being a forever present aspect in my life. I'm sure that it's going to adjust as I kind of better understand my own preferences, my own wants, whatever's available, etc. But I think that as I'm growing more comfortable with all of this, I think that this identity that I'm discovering is going to be around for a long time, but probably going to adjust and manipulate as time goes on, as I better understand myself, as I better develop relationships with myself and others. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's a stop in the road, but it's going to be around for a hot minute.
I like that. I like the connection to discovering more about yourself and also being in relationships with other people. That is always something that you should be doing, and always something that is going to influence who you are, right? Our identities are tied to other people and our relationships. And so
Absolutely.
That one thing that I do want to stress, though, is kind of this concept of fluidity, and how even if you're not this forever, you are this right now, and this is valid, and this is who you are, and we don't need to ever reach an end point, right? We're never, okay, this is where we are, this is where we stop. We don't need to go any further now. It is always a process of continuing to grow and to change and to learn yourself a little bit better.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've kind of learned about myself along the way is through past relationships and past experiences, that anymore I don't want to state or say anything in a way that is intended to be set in stone. The last time I kind of did that was my first long-term relationship. My partner and I were together for just shy of 7 years, from 15 to 22. That was a lot of time together, during very formative years. And during that time, there were countless conversations of, oh, when this happens, when we settle down, when we experience X, Y, and Z, all of this, making those hard, fast statements of, this is what I'm going towards, this is the end goal, there is no other option except for this. After that, after that relationship came to an end, everything for me shattered. And I don't want to put myself through that anymore. I don't think anyone exactly wants to go through that. So one of the things I'm trying to do to, protect myself from hurt, from potential, catastrophe, is by just kind of keeping things as open as possible. I don't know what the end-all be-all plan is, but you know what? This is what I can say. This is where I am now, and this is where I want to go, and we'll see if that happens. We'll see if it doesn't. But either way, we're in for a ride.
I like that philosophy. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you recognize that it's kind of co-constructed. I think so often we have this narrative that we are trying to discover ourselves, and it's all about just sort of wiping away the dirt until we get to the true, real us underneath, when in reality, who we are is changing all the time, and it's changing in large part because of the people we're surrounded by, and that's a feature, not a bug. You don't want to lose yourself, and now that you've discovered these important parts of your identity, good on you. I hope that you're able to hold on to them, but who we are is a very flexible concept.
Absolutely. I mean, if you were to show me a photograph of myself circa when Vi and I first got to know each other about 4 years ago, I would barely recognize myself in any way, shape, or form. We're constantly changing, and I know that I am prone to a lot of big change. So you know what? Yeah, I'm trying to kind of keep things as open as possible for whatever the fates have in store.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. It's fun for me to watch you kind of grow in this direction, because I remember when we met, there were definite, I remember talks and conversations where you talk about, knife play or this particular kinky type thing, but you've really kind of come into your own over the last year or so. And so it's been a lot of fun to watch that progression just as a friend.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that I have been able to, grow a lot over the years, because, I mean, you either grow or you stagnate is kind of my belief. And I would rather grow, to be honest.
Yeah, it's less comfortable, but it's more fulfilling in the end.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Christy, I have a question for you. What on earth is a switchy little ambi hip dom?
So you see, what had happened was, Yeah, it's tricky, right? To distill your sexual identity down to a handful of words, and there are so many that didn't make the cut somehow that maybe should be there. And like I mentioned before the show, Switchy is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence because it's kind of a multiplier. It says that everything that's coming next, I kind of play both sides of, which is to say that somebody who identifies as switch likely is interested in a particular kink, usually centered around domination and submission, but likes to play both sides of it, or can have that same kind of fluidity. And so for me, when I get to little, that means that I enjoy caregiver little relationships that have a perhaps a sexualized or a non-sexualized, like caregiving and caretaking aspect to them. And I am interested in both sides of that equation. Ambi refers to ambiamorous, which is it's an interesting neologism that I have like mixed feelings about, and maybe we can get into that, but it explores it explores this idea around being polyamorous, kind of. It's a stop on the road to polyamorous, or maybe another way of looking at it is, rather than a monogamy and poly spectrum, that you're somewhere in the middle, or that you can go both ways. Bisexuality might be the best corollary, because you might find yourself satisfied in a monogamous relationship, which is who I am today and the life that I'm choosing to lead. But I still identify as polyamorous. Not everybody sees that as a orientation, or as something that's like part of your, I don't know, your set identity. It's maybe seen more as a, quote, lifestyle choice by some folks. And, that's a very real debate that we frankly had on this show a couple of times. Everybody gets to decide for themselves where they fall down on it. But to me, I'm trying on this word and getting a sense of whether or not it makes sense for me, whether it feels like a useful and functional shortcut.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I remember when I think the very first time we ever met, I was going to be on the show, and you were like, let's go get a burger. Let's talk about the show. I need to meet my new co-host. And I asked you about polyamory specifically because that was something that I also had negative past experiences with. And I maybe was holding on to some biases there. So we talked about it, and the way you described it as kind of a comparison to the bi-pan concept, where you don't have to have all of them just because you could or would be happy if you did. Like, you can choose a monogamous relationship and be happy in it. It's just that you have the option of also being with multiple people, and that would be okay too. So that kind of was a huge shift in my perspective, and I think probably opened the door to me allowing myself to explore that as well, because it felt a little bit less like a final this or that kind of situation. So yeah, I think that by itself is an extremely useful kind of tangent to go down.
Yeah, well, and then to wrap it up, hip dom is another one of those very silly made up words that means kind of everything. But I guess what I was trying to capture here is all different types of sensory play. There are people whose particular fetish is around ropes. There are other people that see ropes as sort of a means to an end. There's a pun in there somewhere. I'll let y'all work it out. But there are all these different types of kinks and all these different ways of exploring them. I think what I am looking for, whether there are ropes involved or whatever else, is a lot of sensory play. Things like blindfolds, things like headphones, things like being overstimulated or understimulated, and kind of stressing and taxing the nervous system in different ways, if I can be super nerdy and therapist-y about it.
Turns lots of people on. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you for that breakdown, Christy.
Yeah. And to anybody who now knows more about me than they wanted to, sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, my mom doesn't watch this show. We're good.
Mine might. This might get awkward.
My family doesn't.
Yeah, so turnabout being fair play, V. Soft, dumb, femboy, switch kitten. What is
Yeah.
happening in that sentence?
A whole lot of stuff, I think, is the easiest answer.
A whole lot of really fun stuff is happening in that sentence right there. So yeah, let me break that down in the same way that you have, kind of like one at a time. So a soft dom for me is someone who enjoys doming, but is not necessarily about hard impact. It's more about more of a psychological domination, more of an emotional kind of play, more focused on rewarding good behavior as opposed to punishing bad behavior, I guess, if you're thinking about it in that way. So that's certainly both something I like to be on the receiving end of, as well as on the giving end. Femboy is doing some work there, and it's less of a a specific kink, but it does play into the kink part, kind of in the same way that poly or ambi would, in that it impacts the way I identify with the kink and participate within it. A lot of the time when I'm having a sexual experience, it feels, this is going to sound weird, and I apologize if this is like offensive in some way. I don't mean it to be like this. The camera pans in on my face alone. So
Just commit.
It feels more like gay sex than it does straight sex. It feels more like I am with somebody of the same gender as opposed to someone of another gender. And that impacts my headspace and what I'm able to give and what I'm able to receive, and kind of really impacts that. And I love that aspect of my ability to kind of get into that headspace. So femboy kind of discusses that element there. And then switch, of course, we've got 3 switches right on this panel, which explains
we can't
why
commit to anything. Yeah.
Oh God, no.
Anything, but we're so good at like giving the other people like, okay, now you dominate the conversation. It's good. It works out. And then finally, kitten is kind of sort of a throwback to androgynous cat cyborg, just because I have to, but also it was a conversation that I had with my partner, which is, what do I call you when I'm doming you, right? Like what, because I don't want to be called like good girl, right? Like that doesn't feel right for me. So what kind of term of endearment or term for you when you are playing the little role do you want? And so for me, I was like, kitten sounds good. It's non-gendered. It could be applicable to anybody, and it doesn't necessarily put me into a gendered headspace if I'm not in that space already. So kitten is kind of the pet term. So yeah.
No pun intended regarding kitten and pets.
Yeah, I felt like there might be some hint at some pet play there, but you can just drink your glass very coyly. Take another sip if I'm right.
I'm planning on doing that. See what I did there. Yeah, this is a fun conversation. I'm enjoying this. I hope the audience is having as much fun as I am, because otherwise this would be very weird.